Hello, dear learners. Let's get to another video lesson on the topic of adding and subtracting fractions. Today, you're going to add and subtract fractions that are alike, with like denominators. So, fractions that are like fractions, these are fractions that have the same denominator. So, two things that are cut into the same number of pieces, comparing a pizza out of fourths to another one out of fourths. So they would have the same denominator. Here you see add and subtract like fractions. Here are some examples. You can see that you simply just are adding the numerators or subtracting the numerators if their denominator is the same. So let's jump to it and practice. 5/8 plus -7/8. We are going to follow our integer rules. Okay, so I have 5 and a -7. 5 plus -7, and I just say it, they're all out of 8. So I keep those numerators and I add them. I have more negatives than I have positives, because 7 has a greater absolute value. So there, 7 is 2 more than 5, so it's a -2 out of the 8. I can simplify that by dividing by a common factor of 2. So -2/8 is the same as -1/4. If this seems familiar to you and you want to give it a try, go ahead and pause. I'm going to set these up, and then I'll pause and come back, and then I want you to pause and try them again. So you'll notice what I did is that I took the top, those numerators, with the signs that they were for the number, and I just put them all over their denominator to go from there. So now you can add those numerators and then write them over the denominator and simplify if you need to. Okay, so now you can see that I've added the numerators together. 5 and 7 is 12, so that's 12 over 9. But I'm going to go and simplify that. 9 goes into 12 one whole time for 9, with 3 of the 9 remaining. And that can be simplified again. Those share a factor of 3. So this ends up to be 1 and 1/3. The next one, we'd added -5 and 1, and that was -4, and that is already simplified because 4 and 9 don't share any factors. On the last one, we had -1 plus -5. That is -6. A -6 over 6. We have a negative divided by positive. That is going to be a negative, and it's just 1 whole. -1 whole. Now let's try subtraction. Let's subtract like fractions. Remember, we're going to follow our integer rules. Remember that subtracting is the same as adding the opposite. Okay, because we know that 3 minus 2, which is 1, is the same as adding a -2. Adding the opposite value. So let's try that. If I have -8/9 minus 7/9, I'm going to, first of all, add the opposite. So then I have that same situation where I add my numerators together over my same denominator. So then I add those together and I get -15 over 9, which can simplify. I could simplify now if I recognize that these share a factor of 3, and then change my improper fraction to a mixed number. So here I get a -5 over 3, which simplifies then. 3 goes into 5 one time, whole thing's negative for 3, with 2 of the 3 left over. If you're still having a hard time going back to those mixed numbers and improper fractions, make sure you try an IXL to keep practicing. It's going to keep coming up. So go ahead and give this a try. We're going to check your progress here. Again, I want you to pause and I want you to try them. I'm going to come back with just its setup, and I'm going to go in parts. So it's a little choppy. That's where it seems choppy, is where I want you to pause it and keep coming back to check. So pause now and try on your own. So check here that you have changed it to adding the opposite, and then we'll go from here. So make sure if that part's not right yet, then you pause and go back and check it. So I have a -4 plus a -3, which is a -7 over 5. Simplifying that, 5 goes in there one time with 2 of the 5 remaining. Next one, I have a +3 plus a -5, which would be a -2 over 8. Those share a factor of 2, which simplifies for a -1 over 4. Then I added the opposite on these negatives, so then I have 2 positives added together for 9 over 7. 7 goes in there 1 whole time for 7, with 2 of the 7 remaining. Hopefully, you're starting to feel more and more confident, and if not, please write down questions that you have. We'll move on to adding with mixed numbers. So remember, that is a whole number or integer with a fraction included. So we have 5 and 7/9 plus 8 and 4/9. What we're going to do is we're going to add the whole number fractions separately. So I know that I have 5 plus 8, which is 13. Then I have my numerators. I have a 7 plus 4 as my numerators. Out of that 9, so that is 11/9. So right now it's a little silly because I have 13 11/9. Well, that is a whole number and an improper fraction. We want to change that. So what I know is that I have 13 and 11/9, and it's 11/9 can convert to 1 and 2/9. So what you do is you take then that whole number you already had plus that additional 1, you add those together. So this really is 14 and 2/9. This here we would have a proper mixed number, right? So this was an improper mixed number. We want our proper mixed number, our fractions, not improper. All right, a great time for you to check your progress. Now we have a subtraction one. So we are going to subtract and go from here. Doing the same thing. So I'm going to do, sometimes I like to set these up vertically because it makes it just a little bit easier for me to look at with those mixed numbers. Just an idea, you don't have to do this part, but I know that I'm subtracting those whole numbers and I get 6. And then I'm subtracting my numerators, 5 minus 3, which is 2, out of that denominator of 8. Then again, I know those share a factor of 2, so this whole thing simplifies for 6 and 1/4. Okay, the next thing, sometimes, that seems familiar to you, the next one, sometimes you have to regroup before you can subtract. You might remember this. So right now I have 8 and 6 and 2/9, and I'm taking away from it. We know we need a common denominator. On this one, I have an 8, but I just need to rewrite it or regroup it so that it's just written differently but has the same value. So I know that this could be 7, 1 whole, and 9, 7 wholes and 9/9. There's another whole. 7 plus 1 is 8, so this is still 8. So then I can rewrite it. So I just regrouped one of those into a fraction form. So now I can do 7 minus 6, which is 1, 9 minus 2, which is 7, for 1 and 7/9. Try that same thing here. So I can't take 3 away from 1. Well, I can, right? We know in negatives, but we know it's not a negative because we see our whole numbers. We have 14 minus 12. So instead, I'm just going to rewrite this as an equivalent fraction. I know that 14 is the same as 13 and 4/4, 13 and 1. So I have to take that additional 1 from the numerator and put it here. So 14 and 1/4 is the same as 13 and 5/4. So I just rewrote it, regrouped it to make the number work for me. So now I can subtract my 12 and 3/4 from that. So I can take my whole numbers. 13 minus 12 is 1. 5 minus 3 is 2. And this simplifies by a factor of 2. So this is 1 and 1/2. All right. Hopefully you have what you need. You've taken notes. You've written down questions that you have. I want you to come with your best effort, knowing you don't have to master it, but you should try your best and make sure you ask when you're unsure.